good evening. Well, thank you for joining me for Anzac Day, and I'm going to have more to say on that soon. First tonight, the Albanese government is giving an unelected bureaucrat unprecedented power to decide what we watch and can access online. And not just Australians, but what content the world can access. This is extreme overreach. It's madness. This is a free speech issue, of course, but it's much more than that. This is restricting the news. It's censorship of world events. Imagine not being able to watch historic footage of 9/11.
I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. I'm gonna die. Ma'am, say your prayers.
It's important to watch this, not to censor it, so that we never forget the horror of that terror attack, the tragedy of the 2,977 victims who lost their lives. And imagine not being able to see the moment President JFK was assassinated in his motorcade in Texas. That footage from that moment shortly after midday on November 22nd, 1963 is part of our history. It's not just history books that record world events, but footage as events unfold. And then what about the famous images of Jews after the Holocaust, of children, women, families reduced to skin and bone, starved, nearly to death, barely surviving after the Allied victory? The news is often horrific. It is traumatic, certainly, but it's our history. It's the news. You can't censor it and wipe it and pretend it never happened and turn away. You can't choose which events to allow to be seen and which to censor. And even worse, you can't assign this impossible task to a woke bureaucrat from Silicon Valley, because that's where the eSafety Commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, has her work history.
Spent 22 years in the technology industry working at Microsoft, Twitter, and Adobe. Often people refer to me as the poacher turned gamekeeper because now I regulate the companies. And I was an abject failure in terms of being that safety antagonist inside the company and getting them to do the right thing.
Well, she's a divisive figure with an unpopular agenda, but she found an ally in Malcolm Turnbull, who as Prime Minister appointed her in 2016. As you can see here in this SBS report. Have a look.
And as you said yesterday, Mr. Prime Minister, there's that element of...
Please.
Malcolm.
Thank
Malcolm. What's your strategy, Mr. Prime Minister, when you're being trolled?
I don't pay any attention to it.
You ignore it.
Yeah, just ignore it.
And that's a viable strategy. When you think about a young person who hasn't been in season during question time, may not have the same kind of resilience that you have.
As you saw there in a live chat that's been uploaded to YouTube, they seem to get along famously. They'd first met when Julie Inman-Grant was working at Twitter.
And then you've worked most recently, where we first met was when you were working with Twitter.
That's right.
So you really understand the evolution and development of these social media platforms from the inside. Julie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
For a safer internet for everybody.
A safer internet for everyone. Well, the office was originally called the Children's eSafety Commission, and it had a cyberbullying focus to protect children. Very important. But then the powers were expanded and used more broadly.
We know that those who are Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander, who identify as LGBTQI, have disabilities, are 3 times more likely to experience targeted online abuse rooted in misogyny, racism, homophobia, harassment, you name the list of horribles. We all know they manifest online. There's the disinhibition effect. And frankly, people have been able to do it with in relative impunity, I think, until now. I think we're really reaching a tipping point. So that was a long way of saying I am Australia's eSafety Commissioner.
And by the way, the eSafety Commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, had wanted to reevaluate free speech long before the past week and a half. Have a look at this next clip. She's at the World Economic Forum in 2022 in a clip that went viral where she spoke about recalibrating free speech online.
Are finding ourselves in a place where we have increasing polarization everywhere, and everything feels binary when it doesn't need to be. So I think we're going to have to think about a recalibration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out online, you know, from freedom of speech to the freedom to, you know, to be free from online violence.
Recalibrating the notion of free speech online. That's what she just said. This is a highly controversial idea, but there's been no public discussion about it in Australia. Well, in this next clip, using more woke references, Julie Inman-Grant likens her regulation of the internet to a COVID vaccine.
What we need now is the equivalent of an internet vaccine. We could say the COVID world of masks, sanitizing, and social distancing has its parallels in the online world.
And the program she supports and is promoting globally is called Safety by Design. It cautions against misinformation and conspiracy theories online.
The good news is we already have the vaccine, and we may have several more in development. We already have the tools that allow companies to build safety into their apps and online platforms. We call it Safety by Design.
And this is being supported by the likes of the World Economic Forum. Now, her frustration with the tech companies, especially with Twitter, where she has accused them of not caring enough about safety, is now matched by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Albanese judges that billionaire Elon Musk is the most unpopular of the social media company bosses, and so he's turned him into a villain, as Paul Murray pointed out last night with this excellent compilation.
We're seeing megalomaniacs like Elon Musk going to court to fight for the right to show terrorist content, alleged terrorist content on his platform.
It just shows his arrogance. This is an egotist, totally out of touch. He clearly sees this as a vanity project for himself.
Elon Musk has no social conscience or conscience whatsoever. Quite frankly, the bloke should be jailed. The power that man has, because of that platform that he's on, it's got to stop. That bloke has no conscience. He's an absolute frigging disgrace. And there's nothing else to say about Elon Musk.
Should be jailed? A megalomaniac? An egotist? I mean, Claire O'Neill can't even sort out our borders. Who is Albanese and his team to criticise Musk? You can't even compare the achievements of the two. Let's have a look at Albanese's achievements. At 61, he's been a radical activist in the past. He's had a life in politics. He was a left faction warrior. He's overseen the worst cost of living crisis in a decade. He's the Prime Minister of Australia. Well, that's an achievement we will give him. Elon Musk's achievements at just 52. He's developed electric cars and taken them to mass market popularity. He invented the return of the rocket ship. Unbelievable. People thought it could never be done. He co-founded PayPal. He has built multiple successful companies. He's one of the richest people in the world, a true genius and entrepreneur. Now, Paul Murray made this point last night. What about TikTok or Facebook and Meta? Why just the outrage from Albanese and the others about Elon Musk? Not one word of criticism of TikTok because, oh, Albanese wouldn't want to offend his best friend, the dictator Xi Jinping. So it's all about Elon Musk. Well, what's happening here is the Albanese government, with its weak leadership, is trying to shift the responsibility for the rise in terror and social unrest to the tech giants. When in fact, while radical content on social media is partly to blame, you can't blame the tech giants for the failures of our multicultural society. It's the Albanese government that chose to increase the intake from the front line of Gaza, where many Palestinians celebrated the October 7 massacre against Israel. It's the Albanese government that has deprioritised national security. It's the Albanese government that fails time and again to vocally defend our Australian values as they come under attack. And it's the Albanese government that has not sent a clear message to law enforcement to use the full force of the law against those breaking it or inciting violence. And they've been mostly silent on the hate preachers who have also incited violence. Now, of course, we don't want completely grotesque and explicit violent content online, but it's better to risk having too much than to allow unelected, woke bureaucrats who have a stated pre-existing quarrel with the tech companies to make these important decisions. Now, if the Australian eSafety Commissioner removes content from X or Facebook or any other internet platform, it's not just censoring it for Australia, but for global consumption. Who is Australia to tell the rest of the world what content they can consume online? It's preposterous. And as for the argument that content needs to be removed so that children don't see it and so that they don't risk becoming radicalised, well, firstly, we don't censor the news at night for what's appropriate for children to see. It's the news, it's not play school. I mean, that would be absurd. Secondly, the argument for removing the content, lest it inspire or radicalise others, well, this is a flawed argument. What about the tens of thousands of violent films and television shows and video games? Are you going to remove them too? Because they might inspire violence. The argument is ludicrous and illogical. And the additional point is that if the likes of the eSafety Commissioner is really concerned about graphic content on social media, then why isn't she fighting to remove other graphic content? For example, the graphic content coming out of Gaza. X is perfectly fine, according to Julie Inman-Grant, to show the graphic footage of dead Palestinians or those with severed limbs. But an attempted stabbing of a Christian bishop has to be pulled down. I mean, what's the difference? The approach needs to be consistent. Either ask to have everything taken down or nothing. The hypocrisy and the double standard is blatant, and you can only assume it's politically motivated. An eSafety Commissioner with these sort of powers is Orwellian. The office should return to its former iteration of the Children's eSafety Commission because cyberbullying is still an issue costing young lives. But woke government bureaucrats should have no place censoring the internet. I'm going to come back to that topic in a moment with Matt Canavan and Jenna Clark, but also tonight, a shocking display from pro-Palestinian protesters across Australia today as the nation gathered to commemorate Anzac Day. I'm also going to be joined by University of Sydney academic staff on what is now day 3 of the campus demonstrations. Also, there's alarming reports that some of the teenage terrorism suspects facing court had been watching beheading and bomb-making videos. We'll have the latest details from Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastie. But now let's bring in my panel, the Australian's Associate Editor, Jenna Clark, and Nationals Senator Matt Canavan. Matt and Jenna, great to see you today. Look, Matt, I want to ask your view of everything I've just said. I mean, at the moment, the coalition is in lockstep with the government on this, on ordering Elon Musk to pull down content. What do you think?
Well, look, I think you're spot on, Sharri. In terms of the coalition's position, I think I saw Peter Dutton today say that he doesn't think the eSafety Commissioner should have the powers to ban things globally across the world. But I have probably got some differences with my colleagues, but I don't exactly know what all their views are, of course. But I'm happy, of course, to tell you about my views, and my views are very aligned with yours. Is that these videos this video really shouldn't be banned, particularly given the victim in this case, Bishop Murray Emanuel, is happy for it to be released. I can't believe it, beggars belief, that no one had bothered to ask him before deciding to take the most draconian steps to remove this footage. I mean, he is the victim here in this case. There was a clear public interest to know the radical violence or the radically inspired violence that's occurring in our community. I mean, we regularly see footage of king hits at pubs, violence on our streets, crime. There is a public interest in seeing this material because we obviously need to take a response to violence, and that material sometimes helps facilitate that. So you are spot on about this. The Prime Minister is clearly using this as a vehicle to push a political agenda, as the Bishop implied today in his statement, a political agenda to clamp down on political speech, not violent content, but political speech that he doesn't agree with.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to the Bishop's comments and play, though, that video that he sent out today. We'll play that later in the show. But, you know, Jenna, I think it's a really good point that Matt makes. Not only is the Prime Minister pushing a political agenda here, but it seems to me that he doesn't want to speak about the rise in Islamic extremism. He doesn't want to even try and address the failings in our multicultural society or the social cohesion that's arisen under his watch in the past 7 months. And it's much easier for him to turn someone like Elon Musk into a villain. He thinks the Australian public doesn't like him already.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, I know it really makes for really boring television, Sharri, when you've got a unity ticket with all three of us, but I think what both you and the Senator have been saying this week is so bang on the mark. And I find it really interesting that I think, you know, the fact that the Prime Minister has taken pot shots at Elon Musk over the past couple of days because it's easier. And I think Mark DiStefano wrote a great piece in the Financial Review today talking exactly about this. These people are cowards. Rather than taking pot shots at Elon Musk on his own platform, how about disable your accounts like Jackie Lambie has? And the fact of the matter is, you know, tomorrow we're going to start seeing people rallying in the streets about their failings. This is apparently the party about gender quotas and gender equality on paper, about the failings against women, because 31 women have died in 2024 because of domestic and family violence or violence inflicted by men. Those are real policies they should be moving on, not taking pot shots and build billionaires on social media.
I also just, you know, think the hatred and this practice of ganging up on Elon Musk, not that he would know or care, but Jackie Lambie saying he should go to prison. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know any other figure who has done more for our global community than Elon Musk. I'm sure there are others, but, you know, I can't think of any. He has done extraordinary work in terms of advancing electric vehicles and with SpaceX as well. Now, let's have a look at Anzac Day today. Matt Canavan, veterans have blasted pro-Palestinian protesters. Let's have a look. So the pro-Palestinian protesters rallied across several cities today, especially Melbourne. Victorian RSL President Dr. Robert Webster told the Herald Sun that they're choosing to disrespect the veterans of this country who treat tomorrow as our national day. That, to me, is the issue. Matt, is this hijacking of a day that commemorates those who have sacrificed so much, many sacrificing their own lives for our country so that we can live here today?
Well, first though, Sharri, I want to start with the good news, and the good news is that there were record Australians out commemorating the sacrifices of our ancestors, especially at the dawn services this morning. Reports of record turnouts in my area here in central Queensland. So clearly whatever these other people are doing is that they're doing it from the fringe of society. Most Australians, of course, want to recognise those sacrifices, want to take a moment to come together as a country to unite and show gratitude for how lucky we are that they have made those sacrifices. And it seems now there's going to be a new attempt to hijack, as you say, Anzac Day, just as Australia Day has already been hijacked. And I just, it's concerning to me the Australian government's going along with this, because my understanding is the public service can take Australia Day, can work on Australia Day, and take an alternative day off now under their new stupid rules. I mean, there should be times where we all come together as a country, and Anzac Day should be almost top of that list along with Australia Day, because we are very, very lucky to be Australians, and we're only here thanks to the fact that others put their lives on the line.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something we all need to be grateful for, Jenna, especially today.
Yeah, absolutely. And these absolute morons that have decided to hijack and cause so much distress to our poor veterans. So you just have to see some of the footage that's been shown on Sky News today and in the newspapers around the country, where you see these beautiful people that, you know, they went overseas at the ages of like 17 and 18 and they gave so much. We don't have many of our diggers left, and especially these new age ones where, you know, those people that are still serving. And of course, we're seeing, you know, veteran suicides at record levels. The least we can do is stop and pause. And I think maybe one thing we can take away from it is when you couldn't hear a pin drop today at the MCG when 95,000 people stopped for a moment of reflection. And I think that's probably just goes to show that I think they're definitely, as Matt said, on the fringes.
No, well said. Now, let's have a look at the youth crime crisis. We talk about this often. It's a national crisis. We've seen that 2 very young children were sentenced to jail in the New South Wales Supreme Court, charged over the fatal death of 16-year-old Jason Gallahan in 2021. So these 2 juveniles were allegedly part of a group associated with what's been dubbed the postcode gangs. Matt, this is a very extreme case, but people are struggling. We are seeing different examples of the youth crime crisis, whether it's now with these alleged teenage terrorists, whether it's in Queensland, whether it's in the Northern Territory. Do you think we need national leadership on this?
Well, it's just such a sad story, this case. Such a young child beaten and ultimately dying from this gang violence. Look, these matters are largely ones for state governments to take into their hands, and I'm not sure if any kind of bail law changes or others could fix this. There is also a crisis, of course, in terms of broken families, our broken society, and governments can't change all of those things. I think ultimately it's incumbent on ourselves to all try and build better communities. So I do think here that one aspect here that needs to be looked at is this incident was being filmed. I don't know if it was posted on social media, but obviously that's happening quite a lot, and I do welcome state governments changing the law to crack down on criminals that post and boast, so to speak, on social media. And it also gives rise to the view, I have sympathy for the idea that there should be some age restrictions on social media. We should have, of course, free and open speech for consenting adults, but some of the content on social media, some of the ability to bully people on social media maybe should be restricted to people of older age.
Jenna, just very quickly, I mean, age restrictions are a great idea, but very difficult to enforce.
Well, again, I don't want to sound like a pearl clutcher here, but where are the parents at all of this? And we're seeing, teenagers being accused of terrorism charges. This is terrifying, where the rabbit hole that we're falling into. So at the end of the day, I understand that, there are issues with broken homes, but I think it just goes to show we need to have a more macro discussion about how to mend our community.
Yeah. All right. Matt Canavan, Jenna Clark, thank you both so much for your time. Now, coming up, alarming details emerge about some of the teenage terror suspects arrested as part of those counter-terror raids. We'll have the latest with Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastie, and he'll also join us to commemorate all of those who've served and died for our country. Welcome back. Well, thousands of Australians have turned out across the country for Anzac Day today, whether it be dawn services, parades, or even the footy, to honour our servicemen and women. It's a sacrifice that we should never take for granted. To discuss, let's bring in now Shadow Minister for Defence, Andrew Hastie. Andrew, you are tonight at a war memorial in WA. Look, my colleague Peter Credlin, I think, said it the most eloquently earlier this evening when she said that Australians have always answered freedom's call. We've never ignored a call to fight and defend our peace.
Anzac Day, Sharri, is the most important day on our calendar for a number of reasons. Number one, it's the day where we celebrate Australia stepping out onto the world stage for the first time and being tested in the most extreme circumstances at war. It's important because we celebrate the highest human virtues: sacrifice, service before self, duty, teamwork, courage, perseverance. All those virtues are critical to democracies and their health. And then finally, Anzac Day poses a challenge for us all. As we look sacrifice in the face and we see 100,000 faces of the fallen staring back at us, it poses a challenge. Are we living up to the heritage that they have given us, and are we living up to the virtues they've showed in what they did?
That's such a good point. Tens of thousands of Australians have given up their lives, sacrificed their lives to defend the values that we hold so dear, or many of us hold so dear. Do you think those values are at risk? Do you think we are doing enough to defend these Australian values of free speech, of empathy, of compassion, of respect?
Yeah, I think it is. Every year we have to refresh those values and recommit ourselves to them, because democracies are fragile. Australia is only an experiment starting in 1901. It's been tested before and it will be tested again, and it will be the values that see us through the next challenge. So I think Anzac Day is really important, and I think what I'm detecting from a lot of people is that they're tired of the constant politicisation of our institutions, whether it be our schools, our universities, our sports, and now Anzac Day. People are very tired of it, and that's why we saw a big turnout today. People getting back to basics, celebrating our Anzacs and the virtues that they have shown us.
Well, you just referenced the politicisation of Anzac Day. So, what do you make of these pro-Palestinian protesters who tried to hijack the day today?
Look, I think Australians are tired of radicals hijacking all areas of our life with politics. Anzac Day is a day of unity, not of division. These people are trying to divide us, and Australians are just tired of being divided. And the comments I picked up during the day, people had very little regard for these protesters. Sure, this is a democracy. Sure, people are entitled to express their view, but it was disrespectful and it was a poorly chosen time. Indeed, it was designed to hijack the very day where we come together.
Look, let's turn to the major counter-terror raids that we saw unfold in southwest Sydney yesterday. Today we learn 5 of the 7 juveniles arrested have now been charged with a range of terrorism and extremism offences. The Daily Telegraph has revealed that the alleged youth terror cell was nabbed by police through a WhatsApp group that was found on the phone of the teenager accused of the Wakeley Church stabbing attack. And then the Sydney Morning Herald reported this afternoon that, allegedly 2 of the teens arrested had graphic videos of Islamic State beheadings, with one also allegedly possessing bomb-making instructions. So, Andrew Hastie, this is concerning that these teenagers, 15 to 17-year-olds, had been enticed by this sort of material.
That's right, Sharri. These teenagers will have their day in court, and these offences are alleged. But I think what it really highlights is that there is a contest of ideas out there, and the contest is largely happening out of sight, possibly online, and through areas of the community where we don't have visibility and transparency. And that's why I'm concerned about another terror attack. If there is this contest of ideas happening and we're losing, how many other people do we know out there who are planning an attack? And that's why we've got to support our security agencies. We've got to support the local leadership in these communities and make sure that these young people who are being radicalised don't go down the path of this teenager who tried to kill Bishop Emmanuel.
Yeah, exactly. And ASIO boss Mike Burgess said just yesterday that there's a 50% chance of a terror attack in the next year. It's so concerning. Andrew Hastie, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, as we spoke about at the start of the program, Anthony Albanese is now in a legal war and a war of words with Elon Musk over the X's refusal to remove and censor content globally, mind you, not just in Australia, but globally. So this is uncharted territory with this global censorship campaign. Let's bring in now senior fellow at the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater. Nick, thank you very much for joining me. Look, what do you make of this? I think, as I said at the start of the show, that the content should be allowed to remain online, certainly globally. The idea that a woke bureaucrat with a history at the tech companies should be able to remove content for the entire world online, which is what they're seeking to do, seems extraordinary.
Sharri, I watched your coverage of this story breaking live, what was it, a week or so back, and I watched you say, well, we have the footage, but it's too graphic to show to Sky viewers. Now, you made the right call under the circumstances. That's the call that only an experienced journalist can make in the public interest. You made it. That's exactly where that decision should be made, by the broadcaster or the newspaper, or then the social media platform. It should not be made by the Prime Minister and the rather eerily and frighteningly known eSafety Commissioner. I think this is just completely a dangerous move, and it's done, under the guise of trying to help us. But where this leads is into a very, very dangerous spot, where the eSafety Commissioner, a completely unelected person can make that call backed by the Prime Minister, and that's it. We don't see it anymore. It's up to Elon Musk and X to make their own decision about whether they take this down. I personally think it should remain up on as many platforms as possible so that we can see what we're up against here, which is just barbarism in the disguise of some kind of cause or other. You know, the more people that see this, the better, because they will know that this is something dangerous in our community that we have to be on our guard against at all times.
I think there's a difference between not showing graphic footage on a broadcaster like Sky News, but still having it available if you want to find it. So not completely removing it from existence. And, you know, later in my show, we did show a version of the stabbing attack. It was edited so viewers would understand what had unfolded without it being completely graphic. But Nick, I mean, the idea that a bureaucrat can censor the news, can censor world events, I mean, you know, we need to see these world events to understand what has happened. You know, in my view, there hasn't been enough shown of the October 7 terror attacks by Hamas, because if people saw what they had done, then they might not be so sympathetic to Hamas's cause. They might not be calling them freedom fighters.
Well, exactly, Sharri. I'm exactly with you on this one. You know, the more people that see these images, the better, as far as I'm concerned, because Anthony Albanese's got this line that it's somehow going to radicalise people. Well, you know, let's take that risk, because I think more people would be shocked by this, and more people would be spurred into action against these extremists, and perhaps keep an eye open for them. You know, let police know if they see anything suspicious, if they can see the full horror of it. Let's not hide this away from people's eyes. And, you know, you think about the terrible images in history of people being killed or hurt, or terrible things like, you know, 9/11, which was streamed on television. These are horrible things. The world's a horrible place, let's face it.
Yes.
And we don't want to keep people away from this under the guise of keeping them safe. That's what I find eerie and frightening. The eSafety Commissioner is keeping us safe from this. No, thank you, eSafety Commissioner. We'll make our own decision about this.
It's really extraordinary. Do you think, like I do, that this is the Prime Minister deflecting, that the actual issues underlying this youth crisis we're seeing, underlying the lack of social cohesion, that these are too difficult for him to address? So it's just easier for him, and he's probably got political polling on it for all we know, easier for him to pick a fight with the likes of Elon Musk, but not, by the way, the owners of TikTok.
I want to think that he's acting out of the very best of intentions, albeit mistakenly, on this issue. I want to think the best of our Prime Minister. But unfortunately, the way this government has behaved, particularly in the last year since the Voice campaign went down, everything seems to have a political lens on it. And I don't know, Sharri, maybe you and I are being a bit too cynical, but, you know, we know they poll a lot of things. I'd like to see the Prime Minister... what I'd like to see is the Prime Minister as he really is, what he really believes in. You know, not what the focus groups are telling him, not what the pollsters are telling him. Actually stand up for something, Anthony Albanese. Whether it's something I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. People like politicians who state their views clearly and unambiguously and don't try and have a bob each way.
It was so funny, Nick, when we played that clip before of the Prime Minister that Paul Murray played last night, where he's attacking Elon Musk and he's accusing him of letting his ego get in the way, and he's saying Twitter or X is his vanity project. I mean, he could have been speaking about himself when it comes to The Voice, because The Voice was his vanity project. He didn't wait to get bipartisan support. He rushed ahead because he wanted it all for his legacy, for his ego. So what do they say? It takes one to know one. Nick Cater,
Yes,
thank you very much for your
Indeed.
time. Now, coming up, I'll be joined by Jewish staff from the University of Sydney who have been left scared to their core as pro-Palestinian activists take over the grounds for a third day in a copycat of the Columbia University protest. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Well, it's the third day of the pro-Palestinian protesters camping out at the University of Sydney, copying the aggressive protests that we've seen at Columbia and other American colleges. This is now 72 hours of horrific experiences for Jewish students and academics who understandably don't feel safe to be on campus at the University of Sydney. Just have a look, and we played some of this last night, just have a look at the scenes they're being faced with.
Intifada! 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 Thank you. There is only one solution. Intifada revolution. There is only one solution. Intifada revolution.
All right, let's bring in now two very courageous academics. Sydney University, Dr. Sarah Amador, welcome to you. Thank you for being with us. And Professor Andy Smith, who is the coordinator of the New South Wales State Coordinator of 5A, the Australian Academic Alliance Against Anti-Semitism. And you've just left the University of Sydney in February to go to Southern Cross University. Thank you both very much for joining us. Sarah, you've actually been on campus at the University of Sydney. You teach biology there. You've been on campus this week. What's it been like?
So in the centre of the university, there's a camp with tents, there's megaphones, there's people standing and taking over that whole area. If anybody has been to the University of Sydney, it's the main kind of area, the icon of Sydney University, and that's where they are. They have huge banners, they have flags. They pretty much took over the centre of the university.
How does it feel as a Jewish academic going there every day?
It's very triggering. You walk over the bridge and there's posters everywhere. I walk to my classrooms, there's posters everywhere. Posters that are calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, well, at least the dismantlement of the state of Israel, calling for boycott, calling for intifada, and it's everywhere. And you just, it's allowed.
Yeah. Andy, you've been at the University of Sydney, as I said, you just left in February. What was it like? What were the experiences like for you turning up on a daily basis, particularly in the wake of October 7th?
Look, after October 7th, it was a very scary place to be. There were tables popping up everywhere. There were posters that were popping up. There were students who were very anxious and very scared. I'm also the parent of a current University of Sydney student, and my son, who is at the university, has days where he doesn't feel safe. The thing that hit me as a parent was when they got the students, this was back in October, November, got an email to say that campus security would escort them between classes for their own safety.
Wow, so this an email came out from the management?
To the university, to the students. And as a parent, my son showed this to me, and I wrote an email and said, I've been fine up until now. This was the point at which it really upset me. Because if you're telling me you can't protect my child walking between one lecture and another. And the university came back with a lot of answers and platitudes. They talked about how they have public transport. They run buses between campus and the train station for any women who feel unsafe to walk at night. This is no different. We protect our students. But I can tell you that as a Jewish parent, that's not how it felt.
No. I've spoken to other Jewish parents as well who have children, teenagers who are at the University of Sydney. And Sarah, what really worries me is that not just the University of Sydney, but the American colleges as well, the Ivy League colleges. I mean, are we getting to a point, and I don't think I'm being overly dramatic saying this, but are we getting to a point where it might not be safe for Jews to get a university tertiary education anymore?
Well, hopefully we won't get there. At this moment, I believe that what's going on in the universities is a hijack by a minority that is very loud and has a very big backing. So when I walk through campus, if I was seeing more and more people from outside of the campus coming, they're not students. Those are the people that scare me. I was verbally attacked by people that were not part of the university last year.
What did they say?
They called me a murderer, a Mossad spy, I think was one of them. Go back to where you came from. And
based on the fact that you wear the Magen David, or?
I was actually not wearing a Magen David that day. I was recording one of their protests. And they singled me out, I think, because I think the people know that I'm Jewish. So yeah, I don't know exactly why they singled me out, but they definitely did. And I was suspicious, so they went at me. But the university is actually has been a beautiful place, and I want to kind of make that very clear. I have wonderful Muslim co-workers. I have wonderful Muslim students. I have never had a problem with any of them. It's this group that is trying to hijack the university.
Look, we've got to go, but just before we do, Andy, you know, I reported here on the show that Tel Aviv University representatives came and they ended up being locked in a room with the pro-Palestinian activists. Has any disciplinary action occurred?
Not as far as we know. And there have been letters that have been written by the Vice-Chancellor of Tel Aviv University, and that the 5A group has followed up with that and tried to action some of that. But as far as we know, there is no disciplinary action that's been taken against those students.
I have to just commend you both for your courage and coming on here and speaking out. I know it's not easy. I know there's a lot of threats and blowback in the academic community. So Angie and Sarah, thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now, after the break, the bishop who was allegedly stabbed in a church attack says he doesn't want the video of his stabbing banned from social media. We'll play you that next. And another unbelievable gaffe from Joe Biden. Welcome back. Well, Bishop Mari Emanuel has released a video defending the right for the video of his attack to remain public. Have a look.
Noting our God-given right to freedom of speech and freedom of religion, I'm not opposed to the videos remaining on social media. I would be of great concern if people use the attack on me to serve their own political interests to control free speech.
Okay, let's bring in now commentator Jason Morrison and the Australian newspaper's National Affairs editor Joe Kelly. Welcome to you both. Jason, this is an extraordinary video from the bishop.
Isn't it? And hasn't he read it so well? He's read this exactly as it is. People are bringing in these rules and these actions to serve their own agenda. I mean, what is the agenda? Is the agenda that the Prime Minister has kind of finally figured out that this relentless path to whatever he's trying to do with Australia and its shape and its look is actually not really working out for us at the moment, and that this blind commitment to sort of multiculturalism maybe isn't quite as good. So we've got to get rid of all the evidence of this. It sounds stupid, but then you say to yourself, well, here's the fellow who is the victim of the attack. He has no issue. So the bishop has read this perfectly, as have many people right now. And to me, it seems the only people who aren't reading this the way it is are the lemmings, the ones who want to believe that Mr. Albanese is acting absolutely purely in the nation's interest.
Joe Kelly, I think it's quite disappointing that the coalition isn't opposing the Albanese government and the eSafety Commissioner's push to remove this footage from the internet in all its entirety globally.
Well, Sharri, I've got a slightly different view on this. Circling back to the Bishop Mari Emanuel, clearly a remarkable and unique person to forgive his attacker and to say that he loves this person who allegedly attacked him. So he's obviously living embodiment of the Christian ethos and spirit. But I think he does have it wrong in this instance. He says that he thinks this is censorship, and if it's taken down, it will be used as a weapon to advance someone's political interest. I think it's far more likely to advance someone's political interest if it remains up and free to publish on social media platforms like X by people without names, people without faces, and perhaps with all sorts of different agendas, perhaps to fuel outrage, etc.
Joe, the problem here is it actually happened. It's not like it's a propaganda video. It's a recording of something that historically actually happened. It's not cooked up by the Al Qaeda media room. This was actually a live stream of a church service, and it is happening, and it's a reality of what is going on in pockets of our society where there are these deep hatreds that exist, and this is symbolic of it. And frankly, I would rather the shocking video be out there to be seen, and for us to be having the discussion about the problem, than burying the shocking video and just not talking about it because we can't handle the truth.
Well, Jason,
yes, go ahead,
I
Joe
accept
Kelly.
that. I completely agree it happened. But I think the point is everyone in Australia knows that it happened. I don't think there would be a media outlet in the country that hasn't reported on this incident in great detail. So I find it hard to accept that this is a question about censorship when everybody knows that this event happened. I think this is about whether the graphic and shocking imagery should be available to anyone to publish. I think media outlets with a code of professional responsibility, have the right people and experience to make that kind of judgment, and they're free to do so. But people without names and faces on social media don't have that kind of experience. So I don't think there's a censorship or free speech issue about applying a little bit of regulation and rigour to the way social media operates.
Yeah, all right, and this debate will continue, but let's move on now to have a look at Joe Biden. Just when you think his stumbles couldn't get worse, he does this.
Imagine what we can do next. 4 more years, pause. 4 more years, pause. 4 more years, 4 more years.
Jason, 4 more years, pause. It's so embarrassing. The president.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, we could go on with 5 minutes of, Anchorman gags here. The trouble is, do any of these Democrats actually stop and wonder what he's going to be like in 4 more pause years? Does anyone actually have a clue? Because there's a little insight. And I know they like putting it down to he's a bit wacky, and he loses his way and he's just a dorky old granddad and all this kind of stuff. This stuff's getting so profoundly embarrassing. And you've got to say, you feel for people in America who don't want to vote for Trump, because that's the alternative. Wow. Lucky you, eh?
The issue is, Joe, you can't imagine Joe Biden sitting there and reading hundreds of pages of briefs at night when he's struggling to read probably an auto cue with very large writing.
Oh, look, I 100% agree, Sharri. And look, I love the Anchorman movies and Will Ferrell, and this is almost as if it could have been in that movie. Look, it's just a terrible predicament for the Democrats. This sort of shows the crazy world we're living in when it comes to US politics. I think it's worth pointing out also that Donald Trump faces his own particular problems at the moment as the first former US president to be criminally prosecuted too. So this is going to be one hell of a strange and wacky ride that we're on over the next 5 months or so.
I know, Jason, we say this all the time, but can't there have been better candidates for both parties to lead the free world?
For all that's wrong with our system, we ain't got that. We ain't got that. We might have, our way looking a bit lost sometimes and struggling to come to grips with what reality's about. And we might at times have Peter Dutton saying dopey, stupid things that, sort of shock a lot of conservatives. But the bottom line is we haven't got Trump and Biden. And, that's an upside of everything that's wrong with what we've got in Australia. Yeah,
hallelujah to that. All right, Joe Kelly, Jason Morrison, thank you. And we are out of time. I'll see you Monday. Here's Paul Murray.